Hey friends, thanks for joining us on the Changed Movement channel. Let's get started.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to Changed. I am Ken Williams. I'm one of the co-founders of Changed, and I am so privileged to get to have my awesome friend, Jason Maxwell, with me today. Say hello, Jason.
Hey guys, so glad to join you, Ken.
Oh, it's our pleasure, our pleasure. Hey, this is going to be a treat for you today. You know, changed people change the world, and nothing could be truer with this particular man that you're going to hear from today. This guy has taken his change story. We all have them. Any follower of Jesus has some kind of a change story. He has a profound one, and the ways that God is positioning him and using him to bring real world solutions to big problems, to get in there and just make stuff happen and protect those around, advance the kingdom, is really beautiful. So I'm excited for you to hear from him today. So welcome, Jason. So good to have you.
So good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to jump right in. First of all, tell us, and then I want to get into your background a little bit of where you've come from. But like, who are you today? What are you doing? Are you married? Do you have kids? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so my name's Jason Maxwell. I'm the ministry leader for Flames to Fire Ministries in Arkansas. I'm a father. I'm a husband, a father of 3 beautiful girls ranging from 6 to 17. There's lots of different areas of my life, as there is with everyone's life, but just being able to get out there and really focus our efforts and be a catalyst for change in every area of the kingdom. I think it's very important that each one of us is able to take the things that God has given to us and the things he has blessed us with and multiply that. Sow good seed in good ground and allow that to be multiplied for his kingdom. And that's really all of our purpose.
I love it. Okay, so you didn't always have 3 daughters and married to your wife. So
very
yeah. So you had a pretty different life. Tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
Sure. So very quick background testimony. I was sexually abused when I was a child, grew up, became suicidal between about 18 and 19 years old, not being able to reconcile what life looked like between knowing what the Bible has to say about things versus knowing my personal feelings. Due to being sexually abused, it really distorted my outlook on what love looked like and what my life looked like. And so after suicide attempt and just God intervening in that and allowing me to move forward, I went into the gay community. I spent 15 years in the gay lifestyle, 11 years with the same partner. My goal, even in the gay lifestyle, was I wanted as close to a normal marriage and life as I could have within the confines of my feelings. And so after 4 years of searching, I finally did find my partner, and we spent 11 years together. Fast forward to the end of that. I mean, I always say that we had a very good life all in all, which I know is certainly not every change story's person's story. But I was gay, successful, and happy by all worldly standards. I wasn't seeking change. I had moved past that point. And then after going to my niece's high school graduation and having a radical encounter with the Holy Spirit, where he just poured out the love of Jesus into me, and he just transformed my heart and mind. I never gave up believing in Jesus. My partner and I went to church every week and checked the box, just like most Christians do. Yeah. But I never, in that box checking, I never had a true intimate experience with God. And so when I did have that, and I realized, wow, there's so much more to a relationship with God than just a religious experience. And so within 3 weeks, I had left my partner, started the process of closing down my business, moved from Dallas, Texas to the podunk place of Centerton, Arkansas, which really isn't so podunk, but compared to Dallas, it sure seemed like it at the time. And the rest, that was 11 years ago. And so the rest, God has just done an amazing transforming work in lots of different areas in my life. And I often say, if God had told me everything he was going to change about me at the time he asked me to leave, I probably wouldn't have believed him and stayed. So I'm glad he reveals in parts.
Right. And it sounds like he led you. He didn't just like give you an instruction of what you had to go do. Like he got involved in your life. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's, once you have that abiding relationship with Christ, and you're seeking him in your everyday walk and really every minute, and you learn to trust him as your best friend, he clearly communicates things to you. One of my favorite parts of our current journey, that's just really come, it's weird how God has you do things in the moment that seem like either a little act of obedience or a big act of obedience. And then years later, you realize what it was actually about. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. 7 years ago, God, after the Supreme Court decision for gay marriage to be legalized, I had really lost hope in being able to help people, because it seemed like that was just going to encumber people coming out so much more. And so I kind of lost faith in part of the promise that he had given to me about sharing my testimony. And in that, he told me to walk from Gravette to Little Rock, which was a 360-mile trip the way he had me take it. And so 12 days after he told me that, because when I shared it with my wife, Sarah, she's like, there is no way you came up with that idea on your own. So I guess you better get stepping. So took that walk. And one of the instructions that he gave was that I was to walk 7 times around every school board administration and every city hall through every town that I went through. And to now be sitting here running for state representative to represent Gravette, and my position will be held in Little Rock. There's just so much more significance to the promises that were given during that walk and all of the things that I encountered during that time. There was such growth over that 3.5 weeks, just in obedience and silence with him. But to now look at that and go, he wasn't just preparing me for ministry work. He was preparing a much bigger plan that he had that I didn't even see at the time. So.
Wow. Yeah. So much more clear from here than it was back there, I'm sure. And I want to talk about, it's so fascinating, knowing you and your story, that you, even back then, felt led to specifically go after, encircling the schools, and then also, the government centers. And I want to talk about that in a minute, but I think it's not widely understood out there kind of what can lead to someone feeling like they are the identity of LGBTQ, right? But I know you have some thoughts on that. Like when did you first, find yourself with feelings that you thought identified you as a gay person?
Well, I first started having feelings and same-sex attraction not long after I was sexually abused myself. So that definitely played a big factor in that. Then as I grew up throughout my teenage years and things like that, it was something I always resisted, because it was something I didn't want to latch onto. And yet, I also grew up in an area like I didn't know anyone who was gay. And, that doesn't mean there weren't any. I just didn't know they were.
Yeah.
And so there is the aspect of struggle in that. But then there's, I think we look at schools today and society in general, and there's almost a draw to it, because it's being presented in such a normalized, and yet you're special in that normalized view. And so I think because people want to be special and they don't want to be like everyone else, they tend to be drawn to the LGBT community because they want to stand up for something. And so I think a lot of our society's attempts to help create a safe space for people, and don't get me wrong, I think everyone deserves a safe space.
Right. Yeah. LGBTQ people included, right?
Absolutely. So everyone deserves that safe space. But when the safe space becomes harmful to other people, it's no longer creating a safe space for everyone. And that's where I feel like we have gone from one extreme to the other extreme. And we need to fight to get back to the middle ground of creating a safe space for everyone.
So for those out there that have a heart to get involved and like make a difference in some of the ways that you are, what can be done to protect children from being persuaded or like so influenced by what is shared with them in their school or, you know, in their environments that they find themselves in, that would push them a certain way, right, toward a certain ideology, and not let them make a decision for themselves, or not give them just an even playing field, that type of thing? Like what's going on out there, and what can people do to protect children?
I'll try to keep this short.
Yeah.
But let me just tell you a few things that have really popped out and come out during prior to the campaign, and even in the campaign. So I had 2 school board members approach me and ask me, say, hey, you know, we're really starting to see a lot of indoctrination type stuff come through in curriculum and in our libraries, and we're not sure how to address it. Can you help us, you know, find some ways to do that? The interesting thing is they're really the ones that have the legal authority to do that and are backed up by the state already to do that. But school boards around the country are not willing to take the stands. They also aren't willing to. Most school board members are elected, but they are not paid. So it takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to actually put forth change in policies and procedures at the school level. And then in some states, you've got policies being written by the state that are having to be redone, which is helpful, and takes part of the pressure off the local school. But what we're seeing, so I've had parents come to me who their kids were reading books, and all of a sudden they come across 4 pages of graphically, when I say sexually explicit, I'm not talking about they refer to pedophilia and incest like the Bible refers to pedophilia and incest. I'm telling you, there's 4 pages of graphic description that if you were to read it off, it truly is pornography. It talks about the sounds that certain movements make, and all of those kinds of things. So there is no question in my mind that it's pornographic in detail. And a lot of these books are recommended by the American Library Association. Well, when you really get to studying into that, a lot of money poured into the American Library Association comes from LGBT activists, CRT activists. Other social justice issues are really pumping lots of time, energy, and effort and money into major organizations that affect our education system. And so in that, we really have to start confronting this at the school board level and the local state level to keep those kinds of books out. Because for a librarian, I know this kind of sounds detailed, but for a librarian, a lot of their ability to move up and advance in their career comes from the certifications offered through the American Library Association and others like it. For a school board member, most of the policies are presented to them by their local, like here in Arkansas, it's the Arkansas School Board Association. There's also the National School Board Association. Well, the interesting thing about that is those associations are writing the policy. Those policies are being given to them and written on behalf of the Superintendents Association, which is the very people, the school board's designed to watch over superintendents, but the superintendents are the ones feeding the information. So there's an off balance check and balance system going on there. But when you want to get involved, like for a parent, approaching your local school board and beginning to say, hey, this material is not appropriate. In our local school board, we've done this. I am really pushing and trying to bring forth to our school boards here in my district an opt-in policy instead of an opt-out policy. So instead of expecting the parents to know the 476,000 books that are in our local school system, we're saying, really the school system has an obligation to categorize and rate all of these books as they're bringing them into the system, and then allowing parents on the front end during enrollment to check what types of books and categories they're willing to let their kids be exposed to. Because we're not saying pull the books out completely. I mean, there are certain books like the sexually explicit ones I was talking about, that whether they're heterosexual, homosexual, whatever they are, they really don't have the place in a mind of somebody under 18. That's my personal conviction, and a lot of people share that conviction, but I realize there are other parents that they don't share that conviction. Right. And so, but we have an obligation in the system to be able to put that into place so that parents have the right and the freedom of choice to decide what's appropriate for their family and their kids. So if they're entrusting their kids to the public school system, they need to have a level of control on what their kids are exposed to.
Do you feel that being exposed to ideas like that, or, what you're calling, pornography, and I'm not disagreeing, like, can really influence a child in their development of their identity?
So absolutely. Here's like, just from my personal testimony. So take someone like me who at 6 years old begins to be sexually abused by an older family member who was exposed to the ideas of sex through sex education in the school system. So when we begin to look at that now, when it's so much more prevalent in all areas of every classroom, from history class to sociology, we're exposing them to a lot of different ideas. And ideas of themselves aren't harmful until they're taken wrong. And so, when we're pushing this normalization of sexuality in children, so that it's normal for a 10-year-old to be masturbating, when it's normal for a 12 to 14-year-old to, begin exploring sexuality with other people, whether heterosexual or homosexual. I think what we've done is we're normalizing sexual immorality at such a young age that then by the time they're 16 to 18, they're actively sexual. And that's harmful to us as a society, where it's part of the reason, like if you look at it, part of the reason we have such an abortion issue is because we are introducing kids who aren't emotionally ready. I mean, this is proven over and over. They're not emotionally ready to handle the responsibility of sex. And so when we're constantly introducing that, or we're challenging them to question, if we go back to psychology, we know that between like 5 and 7 years old, that's when children are determining what gender they are. They're trying to figure out how do their body parts and their feelings fit into society. And so when we have the male gender and the female gender, and they're trying to figure that out on their own, it's hard enough. Now you add in 147 other possibilities and say, which one are you? Well, of course, they don't have the mental ability to even make choices on that wide of a spectrum. And so we're causing confusion just by introducing the topics. And so in that, we find that we're causing more and more children to be gender confused, causing more and more children. Like if you look at the statistics, there's clearly more transgendered children in today's society than there was 30 years ago before we actively started teaching these things.
Right.
And
exponentially, astronomically more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good point. So for parents and people that just care out there, that care about children, they could start showing up at school board meetings, right? They could become aware of what books are being offered in the school, what sex ed curriculum is being taught to, maybe even their kindergartners. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just getting involved and showing up at your school board meetings every month and asking questions, you know, being willing to meet for coffee with your school board members and asking questions. Here's what you're going to find. You're going to find they don't know, because the school board isn't actually reviewing curriculum. They're reviewing framework. So they're reviewing framework, but they don't know what actual
so it's on the pages
and videos and everything else is being presented.
Okay.
And that's what's being exposed. That's what's coming to the forefront. There's too much trust from them as to what's going into the actual curriculum. And then there are so many groups and parent groups and websites dedicated to different books and sexually explicit material or social justice issues that you can begin finding, and then just checking to see if those books are in your library. If they are, making formal parental challenges to have them removed. The other huge thing that I would say is, it's because we're having to attack this from all different levels, from state legislation levels, local school boards, and nationally. And it's going to have to all happen together. So voting is really important. Looking and finding out what your representative that you're going to vote for actually feels, and if they're even aware that these issues are there.
Yeah.
Because I found that, you know, in a lot of my conversations with other reps, current or running, that while they hear about it, they don't actually understand the fundamentals of why it can be dangerous to even introduce sexual topics at different ages, because they don't know.
Sure.
And so just raising awareness in general on all of those things. And I know that the change movement has a lot of great information and statistics pulled together that help with that. And it's really important that you make yourself aware of those things.
And if you need for anybody watching, if you need that information and you're not just stumbling across it on our website, contact us through the website and we can try to get you more information. So good, Jason. So this has culminated, like these passions and kind of following God's leading has led you now to a run for state representative in Arkansas.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I never would have anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, tell us a little bit about, how did you get prompted to do that? What does that look like right now? And how can those watching that have a heart to support you? Yeah.
So over the last several years in working with the change movement, going to DC, visiting with U.S. Congress and legislators at the U.S. level, one of the things that I kept hearing back was, well, when we begin to hear from our constituents at the state level that this is a big deal, and as we begin to see across the United States things rise up, that's when we take notice and start making changes here. And coming back to the state level and realizing we've got this grassroots thing going, but then back a few months ago, well, many months ago, 6 months ago, I went with a group of parents to the state board of education and met with our secretary of education. And it was a group of about 10 of us, and there were 7 other legislators that were there. And we were speaking to them about all of our concerns on at the school level. And the secretary of education looked at those 7 legislators and he said, look, we all can sit here and agree none of this should be in our schools. But until you as legislators take the stand and write legislation that makes it illegal, I have nothing to stand on. I can't guide schools if there's no legislation to guide it. And that for me was this instant moment of, now's the time.
Yeah. Incredible. So rather than expecting someone else was going to do something, you decided you'd do something about it.
Right. We can't all wait for somebody else.
No.
For sure.
I love it. Yeah. Well, Jason, you have shared such great insight today. It's nice to get behind the scenes and, hear what others are doing out there, what they're discovering that's wrong in society, and what you can do proactively. You've given us a really good taste of what can be done. And so thank you for that and for sharing your vulnerable story. I just want to encourage people, like, support really this man who is trailblazing, coming out of confused sexual identity into a totally new life, living that faithfully for many years, representing God day in and day out with real integrity, and now trying to give back to our communities, our families, at a time when there is such an all-out war for sexual identity, and trying to protect our kids, protect society and the family unit. So I would love to encourage you, I certainly have done that myself, support this man in his run up for this state representative office. How can they do that, Jason?
Yeah, so they can visit our website at Maxwell, 4 Arkansas.com. So maxwellforarkansas.com. Okay. You can see a lot of the things that we stand for. You can connect directly with me there if you want to reach out and ask questions. One of the things, you can also make donations to our campaign, which we definitely need that. There's 3 other people running against me for the same position, all Republicans. So as we move forward in that, one other thing I wanted to share or point out or just focus on for a second is there are so many other things besides just books, and just how curriculum is written. There's lots of other, when we look at why is now the right time, especially for society to start standing ground in the sexual immorality, what we have is we have a time where our school systems and our society as a whole is rebelling against religion. And so why the church has sat by passively for the last 30 years, and the LGBT community, and really not just the LGBT community, but all activist communities with lots of social justice issues, have continued to hit the doors every day to slowly gain ground. Now it's the time that we have to slowly gain that ground back. It's not going to be instant. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to be willing to fight that fight the same way. And so as we look at the school systems, as we look at our city governments, and as we look at even the Constitution, the Equality Act, all of these things that are going on at the national level, there's so many attempts to go in and rewrite language that has always been understood to mean one thing, and to slowly rewrite that so that there can be monumental twists to that as it's adopted. So we just really need to be on guard and paying attention.
So good. Thank you for all the information and your counsel. Well, I just pray blessing over you, favor, Jason, that everything that you're putting your hands to would prosper, that you would really be able to drive change in Arkansas and make healthy, righteous legislation happen at the state level that can rise on up to federal and beyond, and that families will be protected. So bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Love you guys. God bless you.
Love you too.
Thanks for watching. For more info, head over to our website, listen to our podcast, or find us on social media. And remember, change is possible.